I feel like I've referenced Scorsese. I met um, my max of referencing Scorsese movies for one day, maybe for a week. I just happened to meet it on the first day of the first day of the week. Anytime I'm referencing, I didn't quote though, but I did reference Goodfellas and The Departed.
Do you have any referencing Cap on Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm? He shakes his head no.
Why would anybody tap that? That's why would I deprave or deprive, I should say, or deprave. Why would I deprive myself and everybody around me in that way? It feels cruel to do that. So let's just not cap any Seinfeld or Curb references. Maybe I'll up the ante actually. It wasn't even on my radar until you brought it up. Yeah, the salmon sandwich situation was out of control. Um, my preference would have been um, probably a little bit of Parmesan in that situation, the flakes, and some sliced slices of avocado would have been still a good situation. But salmon with the mayonnaise and just mix it up. I didn't use too much mayo. I gotta watch that. It's one thing I didn't share today, and it's I welcome also Lee, our brother Lee, and if you're joining us live, we're talking about lunch. No, I didn't talk about my relationship with food too much in today's inter inter ministry gathering. It was fun. I didn't mention any of that. I don't think I did. But
No, we had plenty
nah,
of other good stuff to talk about.
what fish? What do you thought? Was there a little fish thing floating around?
I,
Who did
I, I
it?
thought no, I thought the fish would be like the little fish insignia, that the Christians use.
Nice.
That's the only reason I've used that.
I didn't. I missed it. I was staring off into space.
It was a very cute fish.
Well done. Well done. Yeah, we got creative. My mom used to get really creative with lunch. She was like queen of the cupboard or something, like whatever was in the cupboard and the stuff that was left in the fridge, she would definitely whip it all up. I think some people have that talent. So it's the in between day of I'm not getting groceries today. And then the whole sober living situation and communal living situation, it creates a little bit of sometimes some chaos with preparing meals and whatnot because hopefully you have one shelf, at least one shelf in the fridge. And when I was managing a place, I was just like, yeah, let's each get a shelf. And I think we only had one fridge at the time. So pretty much we had one guy who was just like, he's not with us anymore, but it was really good at like, I'm just gonna cook up 20 chicken breasts and all this other stuff. Like he was very much um, a communal person and shared his food and stuff. I didn't, as you well know, Michelle. But
You excel in being shared with.
hey, I'm trying to break out of that kind of. I don't think it's a stronghold at all. I think it's just the the last several seasons wearing down, wearing those seasons down. All right. Well, any other food thoughts? Thought for food? And football season is going to be coming, pretty soon. So it's just like, let the food begin.
Oh boy.
I gotta watch out. I want to bigger pants or anything like that. All right. Well, let's kick this thing off. Welcome to Disciples here, Disciples in Recovery on a Sunday night, which we would love to invite you into this space as the full armor of God. I don't know what week we're in. I lost track. I stopped counting. But we're definitely several months in, and kind of transitioning into aligning some of the principles to not only the Torah portion studies, but sometimes someone will say something, right, in one of our studies, or just like we'll hear something, it'll be like, I think that's what we're going with tonight. And this is really a culmination of this week's studies, and we see the transition of leadership in the scriptures, and so we're going to approach it as a battlefront. Remember Star Wars Battlefront? As a battlefront tonight, and that will be our topic. So if you're joining us live via YouTube, please feel free to join us here within the Fishbowl, which is the Zoom platform. And the link, pretty easy to find if you go to disciplesinrecovery.life, or the Facebook page, which is the same, Disciples in Recovery. I think it's even on one of the feeds. I just like copy pasted, made it pretty simple and straightforward. All right, so let's see some roll call here. I'm here in the basement, otherwise known as not mom's basement, but mom didn't have a basement. She did have a spare room though. God bless her. Uh, here in Colorado Springs. So where are we coming from tonight?
I'm from North
Springs.
Carolina.
All right, so we got UNC. The North Carolina, and Michelle. Where are you coming from?
Springs.
You're
About
like you're like next
4 feet away from you. Yeah.
Yeah, and not everybody knows that, so it's not right. Um, Again, this is a Disciples in Recovery gathering. If I have someone available to read our mission statement for this ministry, that would be great.
Disciples of Jesus Christ, cultivating collective recovery through repentance, healing, and identity.
Pretty to the point. Thank you, Brother Lee. Appreciate you. Full armor of God tonight, and our mission. Michelle, do you want to tackle that?
Sure. Mission is to explore the full armor of God discovering how spiritual tools empower us to stand firm in faith and face life's challenges.
All right. And so tonight we'll look at from a few different angles leadership transition as a battlefront, as it could be. So primarily, oh, here we go. We'll start with the quote. Transitions are the most vulnerable points of any system, not just for what they introduce, but also for what they expose. And I guess unknown is the source. May have to update that. All right. Our objective tonight is twofold. One, to really begin to develop understanding. I know that sounds obvious, right? But in identifying really level one, level two, identifying these spiritual dynamics during leadership transitions. So kind of breaking that down. So, uh, from our past experiences, and of course from the New and Old Testament. And secondly, to reflect on our personal responses to change, specifically in leadership roles, or maybe even anticipating, right, what those seasons of transition may look like as well, right? And our first section today is the identify portion, which is spirit-filled succession or succession, secession. All right. Um, if I have a volunteer, I think it's like 4 slides, give or take.
Well, this is the one of the first ones that came to mind when I thought about transition, so I'm glad we're looking at this. Moses appoints Joshua as his spirit-filled successor, publicly transferring leadership to ensure Israel is not left without a shepherd and a warrior, I might add. But
Right.
Moses models humility, surrendering personal legacy to God's choice, revealing leadership transition as a divine trust requiring ego sacrifice for obedience.
And before we shift slides, are there any other examples that you could think of, um, or that come to mind? And I'll leave a little bit of space there if something else is activated.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Elijah transferring the mantle to Elisha. I mean, I think that's really powerful. I think there's a significance there, and also when Jesus kind of handed the baton off to the church, the early church, we have that. And there's another one that kind of came to mind, but it's kind of eluding me right now. So that's my sign to just leave it at that, I think. Well, I'm thinking, the kingship actually, where David kind of took over, where Saul failed in a sense. Even though David had his own failures, he was the man after God's own heart, and it was through his lineage that the Messiah came through. Even though that was through adoption through Joseph, if you look far enough in early Matthew. But yeah, it's a wonderful thing. It's wonderful how God appoints these people to do that. And to get back to Joshua, it's basically he passed a test. He had the positive report. Him and Caleb.
And I loved your examples, because they really, there's so many parallels, and we could stretch it out further, and this would be a really unique series, I feel, maybe to spread it over a few weeks, especially if we're, doing like a workshop for leadership and that kind of thing. So, what comes to mind for me are, I'm just really, really um, inspired by Aaron. Um, I don't know if it's part humility, and of course he has more than the two sons that were consumed by the fire. right? And so I don't know, he's kind of always on my mind, and there's a little bit of mystery there as well, especially regarding, and like I want to think about the background of like how these guys are um being in these positions and still raising families, right? And so some of it is left to our imagination as well. All right, and yeah, we could walk out so many examples. Go ahead, Brother Lee. I think there's like two more slides.
Okay, Jesus, like Moses, ensures leadership continues by imparting the Holy Spirit, empowering disciples to carry God's mission beyond his earthly departure. Then we're
Thank
getting into shifting spiritual atmosphere.
Thank you, sir. And I just love, the simplicity of this slide specifically because it is, I mean, we're talking about Jesus, but it is about legacy, right? And the way we leave things um when we are in before we depart, right? Especially as leaders in those spaces. All right, yeah. Our second section, as my brother said, shifting spiritual atmosphere. Are you available? 5-minute healthcare prayer.
Yes. Leadership transitions are rarely neutral. They can activate fear and bring up, will the next leader protect what we've built? Pride, why not me? Sabotage, whispers, resistance, misalignment, spiritual confusion. Is this man made or God made? When authority shifts, so does the spiritual atmosphere. Every transition risks becoming a power vacuum, and power vacuums are breeding grounds for rebellion, division, and deception. See the rebellion of Korah in Numbers 16.
And we're really good. We're relatively, fresh um from that example, right, in Numbers 16. But I just want to go back real briefly, because like these are um these are opportunities I feel that we're in this space, right, to see how this shifting atmosphere, especially the first one, um, the fear, not necessarily always will the next leader protect what we've built, but will they make decisions to shift, right? What's been established many times, right? And that's where the passing of the baton or this transition truly needs to be spirit led, in my opinion. And so, kind of a cool breakdown. And I just love the even the verbiage of the spiritual atmosphere. Um, I have to kind of tap more into like what that could really entail. And even within a fivefold structure, and that's where prophets and that are up on that watchtower are really influencers at this point and guides, right? Thank you for reading. That was a short section. I know you're ready. Okay, so next the role ambiguity. I know.
Ambiguity.
Ambiguity. Thank you. And so this ambiguity in leadership, right, in our leadership roles, um, truly leads to exhaustion or feeling overwhelmed, burnt out, um, decreased trust, and interpersonal conflict where you know there's that season or maybe even multiple seasons where there's question marks, and maybe we've witnessed this in our family first, and that's what comes to mind first for me is family. but also, of course, in ministries and career paths and those things, anything that has a structure, right, or hierarchy, even so to speak, that these are elements that seep in when there's so many questions, right? And so that's something to note. And our second modern insight is on social identity threat. And we got right to the point here as well, is the threat of the transition itself, um, within something that's been already established and cultivated, right? And many times it prompts defensiveness, sometimes even violence, man. Resistance, gatekeeping. If individuals fear, a shift or loss in their own status, or even um, a fear of loss of belonging in that group, right? And so we could kind of see that as kind of shaky ground. In both modern insights, they have some parallels there. The ambiguity, especially, man, when we don't know, that unknown is such a could be so divisive in itself. And if someone could read our tactics, because we kind of laid out the foundation of like this is what we could be facing in terms of the warfare, and now what are the tactics that we could apply to really contrast and to be prepared here. Is anybody else available?
Consecrate the transition publicly. Like Moses laying hands on Joshua, transitions should be visible, prayed over, and spirit confirmed, not hidden or politically maneuvered. 1 Timothy 5:22 states, "Do not be hasty in the laying on of hands." Would you like me to continue reading? Guard the atmosphere.
Yeah, you could tackle these if you'd like.
Every shift in authority requires spiritual covering. Pray against division, gossip, nostalgia for the past, and hidden ambition. Guard the atmosphere with truth, humility, and worship.
I'm just gonna stop here for a sec, brother and sister as well. Um, so when we speak about this warfare, right, and I believe that in the covering, the protectiveness, and these shifts of authority, um, is done. The warfare is done behind closed doors. Here with the prayer, to intercede, even if there is something in the spirit, right, that is moving. And um, in my opinion, those who specifically are um, more aligned with the prophetic, right, again, are in these positions for a reason, man. To serve as the, we could say, guards, we could say up on the watchtower. I know there's a couple really good texts regarding the prophetic and prophets. I forget the one I'm thinking about, Michelle. It's in my backpack somewhere, but
Jennifer
um,
LeClaire, Prophet's
uh, say it
or
again.
is it
The
Jennifer
manual,
Prophet's Manual, or is that Eckhart?
Eckhart. Yes,
That
thank
might
you.
be Eckhart.
Yeah, and he talks about these roles, within especially specifically within fivefold ministry and the responsibilities. And the minute that that brother Lee, maybe I just needed someone else to hear it, so I could begin to align, like, oh yeah, prophets, right? And I don't want to use those words lightly and casually as well, but truly, right? The fivefold church is designed a specific way for warfare. And so just wanted to interject there.
Are we kind of talking about different levels of authority, like the leadership in the church, as well as like governmental type institutions? Are we pretty much talking about the spiritual exclusively?
It's a good question. My mind goes specifically, um I would say both, but my mind right now is so like focused on inner circle, circle of friends, for example, home ministry, and those things of that nature. But what do you think?
Well, a verse came to mind, and I think it has to do with more of the worldly authorities, but let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. It's Romans 13:1. For there is no power but from God. The powers that be are ordained by God. So it kind of shows that even with the evil leadership that you see, in history, and just the kings that came against the Israelites, and all the ones you would associate as evil, even those were raised to power by God. I mean, that verse kind of indicates that God is the one that gives authority to anyone, good or bad. So it's ordained. I mean, it's hard to wrap my mind around, but that's kind of my interpretation of it. So
Yeah, I'm still kind of developing a perspective on that, because frankly, it's a hard pill to swallow, right? For many of us who are historians and know history, but I've heard that perspective as well. I'm not sure if I like how I could put that into context, if it's God's allowance or movement, like I'm not sure. But I love that you brought that up, because I'm not there yet. Frankly, it's still something that I feel is developing for me,
yeah,
and that's why I
I'm
walked
having a
this
time
out.
coming to terms with it myself. It's just that if you interpret that literally, you can even take a look back and see how God hardened Pharaoh's heart. He made him stiff-necked, so he kind of works through these other rulers. But I'm going to let you get back to the task at hand,
Oh,
with this.
that's good stuff, man.
But I love that conversation too because I think those are all things that they're very like they're just so worth discussing. And and yeah, like I agree, the Pharaoh part, kind of watching that go on and how it went down and the layers of drama involved. And it's just like, we have our natural ideas of like, well, couldn't you just done this or couldn't you, and it's just like if we it may not make sense to our logical mind, but he's doing all these things for a reason. And so, and that's kind of at least like, when there's people put in power and God has ordained them, and it's like if we don't like them or different things like that, it's kind of like okay, like you know, we're able to have feelings, but it's sometimes it's really hard to be unbiased, really tough to be unbiased.
That kind of reminds me of how I was reading in Jeremiah fairly recently. God was telling the captives, the Israelite captives in Babylon or wherever they were, to be subject to the rulers, to pray for them and to live at peace with them, and that would mean peace for them. So even in captivity, they were supposed to be subservient.
That's incredible.
That's so good, because on the Saturday service that we attend at Olive Tree, the Messianic Synagogue, every week, um, there's a prayer for leadership of the government, and specifically says for the United States, President of the United States, right? And I love what the Rabbi Bill, usually it's an elder, Brother Lee, and those listening, um, who's going to lead that prayer. And there's a reason even for that, right? That they would choose an elder to definitely lead us in that. Um, and but secondly, I love what was mentioned, and it's not a secret because actually they record and live stream the service. So I'm not blowing anyone's anonymity or anything like that. But Rabbi Bill, I believe, and I'll paraphrase what he said. He's like he was pretty much saying like, no matter like who the president is, like we're gonna pray this, and so that to me is such a massive and it could go low key or it could go kind of dismissed, but it's such a massive thing to say because I'm gonna pray no matter which way I vote. Every 4 years there might be a transfer of power or not, right? Or whatever my opinion is, I'm still gonna pray, and so that kind of sets me in alignment with and following our elders and letting them set precedent and guide us. Such a such a learning opportunity, I feel. So, and yeah, brother Lee, the way we free flow around here, I think you know the get down, so we could interject and as much as we
I
feel
got
like.
one more, and it just ties the bow on what you were saying. First Timothy 2:2 instructs us to pray for the kings and those that are in authority. So I guess that's wide open right there. So I'm liking this subject. It's difficult, but it's good that we're talking about it. It gets us in the right frame of mind to have obedience. This is all about obedience.
Yeah, and ultimately,
Amen.
I feel like we've restructured what warfare means in the sense that it's there's not always like the other or the enemy that we want to see outwardly, and that's been a shift. I think I've kind of had to confront myself because I want to go blame and fight people uh, back. That's old behavior, and that's not really what warfare is about. So all right, I'll read number three, and then Lee, you could read. I think there's number four. And Michelle, maybe you could read number five if there. I think there is one. Number three would be empower, don't eclipse. And I love this tactic because it's so applicable, right? Moses, allows. It's not even that he allows Joshua. I think that's the wrong word here. He promotes, right? Joshua's leadership growth, and we're talking about ZPD a few days ago, right? That zone of proximal development, and so he's cultivating that with him without overshadowing him, which is it's kind of a tricky thing, um, and also avoid manipulation disguised as mentorship. I've come from an experience, and this is my opinion, with 12-step programs that many times we could begin to you know um, worship even our sponsors and things of that nature. That's my opinion. And so here we see a really clean model of a true spiritual father that is releasing, right, everything to the next generation, which is what we're called to do.
Clarify the mission. The people didn't just need a new leader, they needed to know the mission hadn't changed. Anchor vision and identity in God, not personalities. You know, I just want to throw something in. You guys were talking about sports earlier in the program we did earlier today, and I always kind of joked around about fanatics are so fanatical that even if the players on the field switched uniforms and they wore the other colors, most people, unless they were there rooting for their son, they would still cheer for their team, even if it was the same people they were cheering against. So this was a perfect time for me to bring up that old standing joke I had about that, because that's really what it's all about. It's all about wearing God's colors, not who's wearing them. I don't know if that makes
That's
sense.
good.
Yeah, that's I gotta let that one. I gotta let that one sink. Um, I've had that experience, in sports, man. Like the guy I was rooting for or against, all of a sudden he's on my team, and it's like he's the best guy in the world, right? Um, that that whole uniform change, yeah, it's really good.
But that's kind of what we are in recovery and discipleship. I mean, we start playing for the right team, basically. Anyways, that's kind of what came along with that. Thank you for indulging me with that. I've been wanting to say that since earlier.
That's so good. That's funny. Okay, submit to God's choice. Even when personal hopes are dashed, Moses' sons weren't chosen. Trust divine selection. God's appointments often disrupt human succession plans.
Tough one. Let me leave that one up for a sec. Okay. Yeah, I think kind of Michelle was talking about this, and I'm still like framing this. I haven't really explored this topic in recovery, or really just in this way, in this specific way. So there's a lot of newness going on in my head, um, especially in what he allows to be the secession. Because I have trouble with the word appointed. Because then to me, I feel like that's a selection, and sometimes I'm like, why would you select that person, right? Um, and so I'm battling with some of this for sure. All right. We have a few reflection questions, and whether we tackle all three of them or not, we'll see. But um, and of course, we could kind of reform and reshape these questions to our own experience, and see what happens. Right. Number one is, have we resisted new leadership? This is out of fear or pride or unresolved grief, but really out of anything. And what did those experiences teach us? Um, and how did we move forward, and what did we learn from those experiences of resistance, really? Secondly, is about loyalty, right? Have we ever confused our personal loyalty with spiritual alignment during transitions? And again, maybe after the fact, we're like, that wasn't really spiritually aligned, right? So, and of course, these could be very modern and experiences we're going through in this season. Right? They don't have to be past experiences, or even some that we anticipate as well. And lastly, to describe perhaps our role in the development of the next generation, because if we really look at this message in the scope of spiritual warfare, it's developing the next warriors, right? And as followers of Jesus, and not of Rick, right? Which is, maybe there's some parallels, but not really. All right.
Like
So
even if you're just stepping into leadership of some sort, that should still be your end game, is preparing, to pass that baton eventually. That's something to keep in mind, no matter how far you're into the leadership role. I like that.
That's good.
right, that's a good point, because some of the brevity of these seasons, right? It may feel very interim, and because even 5 years could be very interim, and so I'll open up the floor, because I feel like I have some strong opinions on a few of these.
I think so. I'm looking at these, like the first one specifically, resisted new leadership. In kind of the departments that I work in, there's occasionally switch ups and things like that. It's not often, thankfully, but when they happen, if you get somebody that doesn't really understand the scope of the job, or they don't understand kind of the depth of the work that's being done, and you just get somebody in that's kind of like, shoot from the hip mentality, or just they don't want to deal with it, or they're like, oh, talk to this person, oh, do that, or diversion, diversion, divert. And it's like at some point it's your job. Like, and so I think um I I don't know that I've actively resisted new leadership. But it's like when I smell like, oh, they don't really understand what we do, or you know what I mean, something like that, then I think I may, um, I don't know. I definitely, I will say, just as nice as I can, I definitely am resistant to pray for them sometimes, because it's like I just want to complain about them, and so I need to just, like, we can look at that like a president, or we can look at that as like a governor, something like that. But when it's like an office away from you, and it's switched, and they're like, their efforts or non-efforts are making your day bad, like that's another like level of like, this is not good. Like, this is affecting my day. Like, that's when I think, at least for me, kind of the like, oh no, pray for them, pray for the ones in power, like pray where I'm just like, I just want to yell until I'm hoarse, I don't want to like pray for them. And which, bears absolutely no fruit and sets the whole landscape on fire. But so I think that's more, I've resisted it out of, I guess, just anger, or like, anger that certain roles that, would be treated frivolously, or would be treated like, "Well, what's the big deal?" It's like, sit down. I will share with you what the big deal is. And like, and so it just is like people who maybe don't understand the scope like that. I find I get very kind of, I have a low motivation to pray for people in those situations that are in leadership that affect me. So that's my.
You know, I love what you said, what you shared, because it sounds like the intention, at least, of what you shared is one of protection and really reverence for what it entails, what your job entails, and mm, so I could very much relate to that. Um, and this is very much, maybe the question I didn't want to confront, to be honest about it, because here within disciples in recovery, we are moving forward to electing a board, um, which I'm struggling with. Um, I've been pretty much a decision maker up to this point, and are there checks and balances? Yes and no. I've been checking in with people and having dialogue about decisions that I feel sometimes are shared, but ultimately I make the decision, and that is not sustainable because of everything that we discussed today. It is not the design, his design, um, in terms of, there needs to be, for this specific mission, more voices and more input, which my fear is like, and I shared this today. on my brother's platform, is that like that the download will be corrupted. You know, there's a mistrust there that I'm struggling with, and that's okay. That's okay that I walk this out, um and that I come to him with guidance for guidance, because it could be possible that there's a direction, of course, that I'm not seeing. We have blind spots, and ultimately, um, there the secession is his design, and there needs to be a person in the long run that is able to step into a lot of the roles that I may not be able to sustain. You know, he has other plans as well. So, me being open to that, and I just want to rewind a little bit. Um, and I think number four helps me. Number four says clarify the mission, and um, and I think this is going to help me in that we have an anchored vision, in disciples, uh, in this organization, um, and that's what gives me, I don't know if comfort's the right word, but will help me surrender some of my fears, is that people who come through and they stick around, it's not, I mean, they're just giving up a Friday night or Saturday night or Sunday night or whatever night it is, right? And they're building with us, right? I mean, Lee's here, and we have different faces, like it feels like every gathering. So that point that, hey, we have a mission here that's clear, and I think that'll help me moving forward with some surrender. We don't have to like something to surrender it right away, right? But we do have to be obedient. And so thank you for letting me share that current mindset, because it's something that is developing.
I have a limited response to being able to answer this question. I think that I'm psychologically resistant to new leadership just because I don't want to say because I'm an addict or because I have the potential to be an addict, but I'm a creature of habit, just used to getting into a routine and getting good at that routine, and just an innate knowledge that new leadership means a shakeup, and that sometimes people like to do things differently on purpose to shake things up, and they shake up the leadership a little bit. They move people around. Um, so that's kind of just being the creature of habit is the way I answer to that. And the next part of the question, or the next question, had to do with loyalty, I believe. How have I confused personal loyalty with spiritual alignment? Um, you know, I don't mean to acknowledge that I'm a schmoozer or anything like that, but I like developing relationships, and just being able to get along and develop a relationship with a leader. I know what I can so-called get away with, and it's not anything malicious, like it kind of is coming out that way, but just having a good relationship and them knowing that I'm a joker, for example, and that it, I don't know, because I think a lot of things are about relationships. So, I mean, when you get a new leader, especially one that you don't know at all, that you have to start from scratch, and that can be kind of daunting. It can be refreshing in other ways to other people, but especially if you have a good positive relationship and you got a routine down, um, you could just kind of resent. having a new leader. It's just something that you don't look forward to. And because of that psychological mechanism, it just kind of plays out emotionally. It's almost like you don't give somebody the chance that you should, and you're not seeing the positive things. I'm thinking of those old movies like when we were growing up. I don't think you guys are as quite as old as me, but some of those movies about when a new principal came to town, like they were these rough inner city schools, and these principals came in knocking skulls. I kind of had a principal like that, and nobody liked them. They were mean, but at the end, they were kind of endearing because you saw the order that they actually brought. So um, I know that's a weird example, but that's kind of what's coming to my mind to answer those questions. Now, is there a third part to the question or a third question? Oh, passing it on. Yeah, I kind of already spoke to that. It's a great thing to keep in mind that you're preparing the youth. Kind of what you're doing with the academy, and that's what ministry is all about. It's all about empowering, because there's always going to have to be a leader that steps up. So. Um, Yeah, my role in that is pretty much just acknowledging that that's what it's all about in a lot of ways. Thank you.
I love your pop culture. I'm a very much I reference pop culture like all the time. Some of it fits and some of it admittingly doesn't. But I love your reference to like the new guy in town and the new sheriff in town type of reference. It's classic and it's relatable. It's and they say nothing new under the sun, right? Because we have a tendency during some seasons those paradigms make more sense, right? And some personal seasons that it makes more sense and they're definitely more relatable. Um, what came to mind for me is I was my first or my introduction, I guess, into um faith-based recovery was through Celebrate Recovery and the ministry that I was attending at the time was pretty pretty fresh in transition. They had made uh, they were transitioning pastors, and so the new guy in town, like Lee said, the new principal is so good, and I've been a teacher, so I know how that feels. Uh, I've been through a few principals, but the new pastor, I heard a lot of like comparison, like he's not this other guy, and I didn't have a framework of comparison because I didn't know the other pastor. I knew him by proxy through a close relationship and through a few people that knew the other pastor previously really well. And today I see the confusion, in my opinion, that uh, that he was trying to lead a ministry, and I believe he's still the pastor there at that Celebrate Recovery. Um, in the shadow of the guy who just left and just how challenging that could be, you know. And I had my own personal experiences where at some point I just said, I don't know if this is the place I need to be. I don't think it was anything about loyalty or not loyalty. Um, I didn't really I never felt like I had a loyalty there to anybody, only to the congregation as a whole and how I could um, support some of the men. That was like what I was loyal to, and there was just a little bit of spiritual misalignment for me personally at a certain point. Um, I think some of the difficulties I did face, and it's kind of going back to number one a little bit. is that I carried a little bit some of my own core beliefs, brother and sister, and whoever else is listening, my own hurts into that ministry. One of my core beliefs, negative core belief systems, were that I'm overlooked and I'm not good enough and I'm always bypassed. And those have roots in areas that now I understand where they came from and that they're not valid, or the feelings are valid, but they're just um, you know, falsehoods, right, by definition. And I think I was in a period of transition where I felt overlooked and all these other things, and um and so my own personal perspective, it was really difficult at the time to be down with all the transitions that were going on, right? Like, why is he being chosen and not me, and all those kinds of things, that really they really undermine a ministry. And I'm in repentance from even those thoughts and words that would come out of my mouth, and even some of the actions. Like, well, I'm not going to be present then. And that's okay to say, like, this isn't for me, and make a decision and move on. And so I think that's some of the input I could bring to those transitional times, specifically there in that ministry.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point that you should reserve the right to walk away from something under those conditions because leadership is very impactful. It can really change the whole way of doing things. So if you're not really bound to an organization like that, I can see how that's a viable option, especially if you've got some alternative things that you can turn to that can meet the same needs.
And and there was a commitment and loyalty to my um to the man that was sponsoring me, who was one of the leaders there. So it's really difficult for me, Lee, to break off and have these boundaries of relationship. And over the last few seasons, I've seen that it's necessary to say, like, this is the end of our time. And that's okay. It hurts a little bit because I'm a very emotional person, but it's okay, and it's actually healthy to know that the stepping stone is not your landing spot, right? And to put that into perspective, in a kingdom perspective, or align it with the kingdom perspective, is necessary.
I think that can be particularly applicable to sometimes when people get so-called church hurt. I imagine it can happen under new leadership. People just don't feel at home because things like that change. So it's a wonderful conversation that can lend itself to all sorts of institutions and organizations.
So I think this is a really good question. It's a deep question. Um, I don't feel like I fully understand it. Um, have I confused personal loyalty with spiritual alignment during transitions? Um, so I think that what I'm looking at is, and I guess I know that these are just like more talking points. It's not like you got the answer wrong, but like, but I think it's when I was at my church in Arizona, the lady who was kind of, the um like did everything. Like most churches have a church mama. She was kind of the church mama, and she ran like so many different ministries, and then she went home And one of the ladies that I really liked, she had been kind of a mentor, um, and she took over a few different ones. Um, and I felt like I had a lot of like loyalty to her. And it wasn't anything that was ever demanded, but it's like I liked her. I understood what she like her thought process, like, and it's for me, it's really hard to like, once I understand, a person and their thought process, and I at least have a handle on things like that. Like, it's really, I mean, I'm pretty pitbull with loyalty in those areas because it's like I'm not going to form the bond, if if there's glitches. And I just didn't have any glitches with her. She was, did what she said, meant what she said, all the stuff. And then I think when she started doing setting a lot of things up, and I wasn't trying to be part of the different ministries that she was in charge of. Um, but a lot of people really disagreed with how she did stuff. And and I just kind of had that attitude as like, I don't care. I was like, if she did it, I'm on deck. Like, and so but I wasn't like taking time to be like, let me think about this. And so, but I just was like, I don't care if she's in charge of it, like however she wants to do it, like just roll with it. And I don't know if I was like gaslighting some of the people that would like, just vent about it or stuff like that to me. But I just wasn't really I wasn't interested in, hearing it. But a lot of like those types of things, like I wasn't signing up for the ministry, that she was a part of. Um, and so maybe I would have thought differently if I had been more like close to it. But I think that's just one example for me when like I may not check in with God sometimes if I have that like, nope, this person's gold, let's move, and but like be like one of the gifts God gave me is pretty pretty solid discernment. So I think in part of the way, like I feel like, I write on that discernment, but it's still important to pull back because at that point, when I have that much like, heart behind somebody, I'm biased, period. Like I'm going to God through that lens sometimes, and I'm not going to God be like, okay, even if your answer is no, or you're not behind this person that I care about or really love, or something like that. I want to go with where you want to go, God, not with where the person goes. And so I think for me, once I have a personal loyalty, it's hard for me to be unbiased, and it is hard for me to not go to God through a lens of like, this is right, huh? Don't you think? And like, but it's just to really show up unbiased, um, is a thing I work on.
And I think it works in the inverse way as well because, you know, specifically like in I'll put in context of recovery, right? Many people in recovery, even those in like um, who are in recovery from codependency, like coda and so on. Typically, 12 steps is a pretty predominant or dominant even progression, and sponsors are involved and so on. Um, and um, I've had the experience, of serving as a sponsor, and I don't know, it, I don't even today. I just don't like the idea of it, and that's just my personal thing. Um, but like my download was like God's like, well, if you don't say yes, someone else is, and I it might as well be you. And so, um, but I think like it's kind of a landmine, man, where it's like loyalty does play a factor because many people, especially newer in recovery, are are working out a lot of their roles and family, um, kind of they're finding new families is just the way I could say it. And so many times we're kind of mama figures and dad figures, and people even get the nicknames like mama this or daddy this or whatever, papa this. And that's okay. I'm not, for my perspective though, is that sometimes it becomes like, oh, you're going to disagree with me, then fine, go make a mistake. And I think that's a little harsh and even manipulative. In my experience in recovery, is like that's not how you guide someone, right? And so there is a misalignment there, and that's why this question really allows for us to discuss both the spiritual alignment and misalignment, right? If we're um that loyalty does kind of play a factor. Maybe loyalty might be not be the best word, but I would be interested, Brother Lee and Sister Michelle here, in this is a panel. Like we are right now a panel and we're discussing this. I would be interested in having like some um even outside of the faith, so to speak, having this discussion even in a broad sense with just this question and to see how people would feel that without the teachings and things like that. But anyways, that's my input. um I know there's a third question, so I'll leave that one up for a minute too.
So, describe your role in the development of next generation. Um, so I think, um, like career wise, like I look at it and I don't feel like I'm doing much. There's a lot of people who do what I do that like teach and take on and mentor and stuff like that. And I'm not opposed to doing that, but I feel like um, and I it's one of those things where like sometimes maybe I just take it too overboard because I feel like a lot of these roles, like if you're gonna step up, like step up and mean it. And I have a certain expectation for like, and not to sound bad, like when I was coming through, there was I didn't like there was maybe one person that I connected with that I felt did it the way I would do it. And I don't know. So in at least in career wise, I haven't felt like um, really motivated to do that. Um, and a lot of times it's time that goes into it. Usually the people you're working with are pretty motivated, so you're not dragging anybody across the finish line or anything like that. But it takes time, costs time, costs effort, and there's not a lot of, reimbursement, for that type of stuff. So I don't not doing too much there, but I think when people get hired, we do kind of pour into them as far as like new people kind of starting in maybe an area that they're not entirely familiar with, like our just like working in our department, like to kind of walk them through and to just kind of just like shepherd them. And so I think my role in the development of the next generation, just in general, is I just am I'm willing to shepherd and disciple who God kind of puts in my path, I guess is what I'll say. So I'm not like running out trying to like, hey, can I help you? Can I, and it's just like you know, I think I can get really good at like stacking my to-do list. And then it's just like, oh wait, I don't actually have the energy to do all of this. And so I have kind of tried to pull back. And I think in like spiritually, I went through such a season in Arizona where, you know, I was new to Christ. And it was like if you were if you were within arm's reach, I was gonna get your ass to church. Like it was, you know, it just was not like if I love you, you're coming to heaven with me. I don't care. Like I'm kicking and screaming, but you're coming. And so like I had a huge season where there was just so many people that like there was discipling and there was, like, walking them through and just a lot of the hidden stuff, like the stuff that nobody else will ever see, like just the um, a lot of that and that was beautiful and like they're just all like flying little birdies now, like just like loving God, like, and so I think like that's fun to like to see and look at. And I had definitely kind of like pushed and like overdone it because it was um, I probably gave a little bit more in certain areas than maybe God was like calling me to do so. And um I don't feel like I got like too burnt out in that area, but in like faith-based, like that there was the season for that. And the season I'm in right now, I guess I have less of an opportunity for that type of stuff because I don't really know a lot of people out here. But faith-wise, my role in the development of the next generation, um, I think it's that like what I can see kind of unfolding is being the trustworthy person that people can come to when they're ready to talk, when they're ready to have like an experience or a prayer or something. And there's I share an office with several people, and probably about three of them, I definitely feel each one of them in their own ways kind of dipping their toe in the pool of God. And it's almost like how little kids will be like, they'll say something, kind of look at you and like, well, because they're trying to get your response or to try to get you, not in like a weird way, but just almost like I want to talk about this, but I don't know how to ask you. And so like I'll see them kind of do those little things. And so I think at least my role right now in the next generation of just believers, really just kind of like being consistent, showing up, and really just giving people a safe place, um, where there's grace and there's mercy, and especially because a lot of the people I work with, it can be a real, I mean, just severe, graceless environment. And the training is so shame based and stuff like that, that they're so like wounded animals when they get out, that it's to have a little bit of grace, um, makes just the biggest difference. So I think I'm just gonna be a grace giver for the next season and see what this does with the next generation of believers. So
And I love how your approach is so like you talked about the high standard, and how organic it is, really reflecting where you're at right now, not any pressures to be anything outside of, you know, um, where the Lord has you is what it sounds like, and that's refreshing, you know, to not try to take on everything, and I think it's sustainable as well. Um, Thank you for sharing that. I'll say, I'll be very specific here that, um, you know, Disciples Academy has been something that I think has been forming since probably since I was in school to be an educator, on some respects. And there was a season where, I started learning about like the highly sensitive, um, There's a book called The Highly Sensitive Person, and I look at it now through a different lens. Um, and so you know, bringing some of those elements, and many of the ones we do here in this ministry, um, and really creating. I don't like to use the word curriculum too much, but I think that's the most fitting word right now, is creating a curriculum that at some point, um, the vision that the Lord has shared is like someone else is going to take that on, um, until the next generation may still be like someone, older than me or something like that, taking the curriculum and teaching it, in their basement somewhere in Alabama, or like, I don't know. It might even be a different country. I don't know that. But I do have to prepare and be committed to what he is wanting me to do, is develop this, from Passover all the way to Passover. So for 1 year, and not that it wouldn't change after that, but that way someone could have a full year of curriculum per se. And in terms of youth, because generation, right? In terms of youth, um, with specifically with the Disciples Academy, um, is making the space and the time, to support families who are homeschooling their children. He had, again, like, this has been forming for a long time, and we've seen this shift in education, and I have my opinions on it. It's not always, I think, the right approach, frankly, but it is a shift, and to acknowledge that is something that I think he is beginning to move into, ministries into this area of support, um, where I could, make have an influence, in supporting families. And so the specifics are, giving about 20 families or so an opportunity, for access to resources and things like that we're developing from scratch. Because what I see out there isn't really, it's good, but it's not really the specific thing that he wants us to design here for this academy. Um, and I'll just add this. I could create all the curriculum I want, and I could do all these things, but it is about equity. It is about listening. It is about serving and asking the families, what do they need? You know, I'm not them, and giving space for inquiry-based opportunities, for children to ask questions that are in a protected space about themselves, about their relationship with God, about what they understand about God or misunderstand. Um, and right now is the time to do that, I feel, because the loudest voices in the room are sometimes wrong. And those are the ones that are leading our children. And we want to talk about, and we heard this message a couple weeks about sacrificing children. And in the scriptures how that looks, and it doesn't only look like trafficking and those overtly things, and they're horrible, horrible things, but it also looks like miseducating them, and missing the mark with them, which is by definition sinful. So I think I have an opportunity to serve, um, to teach, and, for I don't know how long, but I'll let him figure those things out and try to do the best, to the best of my ability, and also be open-minded at the same time. Um, I'll end with this. I feel like this is going to be my final thought. I've had the opportunity um, to get to know students that I was serving, um, that they've trusted me with some areas that are really hard to hear, that children go through. And, I shared some of my traumatic experience or trauma experience, today I shared some of that. Um, and so I think part of the development of the next generation is coping skills are the wrong words, you know, but the covenant and healing from these areas and learning about that at an early age, I think is something I don't really hear often. What I hear is like, oh, they're too young to learn that. Do you know what they're watching online? Do you know about the things they've gone through, the things that they see on TV, and so on and so forth? They're not too young. Never in the scriptures, like I don't know. I don't want to go off on a whole tangent, but my opinion is that we need to have high expectations for our youth, and they'll meet those expectations and they'll surpass them. So the ceiling of the teaching has to be high. And so I think that has a lot to do with some of the work that we're doing. I say we as a collective, but also personally in under his covering and by his design. Um, yeah, I think that's my final thought tonight. And so I'll definitely invite us into some final thoughts, questions, resources, opinions. Don't throw anything at me, but I'll open up the space. Ooh, what was that? Was that like a
It was celebratory, whatever it
party
was.
favor? Yeah, it was a
It's
party favor.
party, party.
When I saw the topic at hand, the first thing that came to mind was it was some sort of preparation to assume a leadership role because, I think a lot of us feel caught into that. And I don't know if it's wrong or not to assume that, we are called into that, but that's kind of the direction I thought we were going. And then when we got into the discussion, it was more like um, not assuming the leadership role. It was acknowledging the authorities that are above you. And no matter what position you have, even at the top, you do have people above you. That's kind of how the whole thing's designed. But when we loop around back to this last question here, um, it kind of indicates that we all have a leadership role in general in preparing the next generation. So whether it's official or not, I think we do have to assume some sort of leadership capacity. And if it does speak to the broader sense of assuming a leadership role, then the things that we talked about going into that are things that we need to be mindful of if we are to take official positions of leadership to some extent. How do other people look at leaders? It was just a nice reflection, even if you're going into the leadership position. So I can see how it can be both sides of the fence there. And maybe we should always, see things from both sides when it comes to that, because it's all about God ordaining. And there's a question there about confusing spiritual authority or spiritual direction with your relationship, and that's something we always have to keep in mind. Um, we do have relationships with people. We like some people better than we like others, but if we keep the main thing, which is our spiritual relationship with God, um, that helps us just to be obedient on one side and to be a better leader on the other side. So that's my conclusive thought.
Amen.
All right. Yeah, I putting together the message, Brother Lee and Sister Michelle. Um, you know, I was like, how do we approach this and have some different areas to really think about? And it's gonna leave me, I think, with some residue here, definitely. So I appreciate the way you framed it, Brother Lee, as well. As like um, when we're thinking about the next role, what will that entail as well? Um, so I want to just thank those who are joining us live, and of course, um, in on the rewatch, so to speak, right? That we're, might be 6 months from now, might be 2 days from now, or who knows that someone is listening to this video, or maybe a portion of it, right? And so I just want to, pray a blessing over, uh, you know, the dialogue, the hearing, and also the application, right? Because uh, when Michelle might ask me to do something or something, and I didn't really hear her until I do it, right? And so, just, I thank you, Lord, for just the opportunity that we've had this evening to explore, to see really warfare from, I think, a different perspective that I haven't really thought about it as warfare, and also for the tactics. You equip us well. Sometimes you equip us on the way, and sometimes you say, like, here's all the stuff you need, now go. Um, and so I feel confident um, moving forward that I just, this was time well spent. Also, prayers over, it's faith frequencies, correct, Brother Lee?
Yeah, Faith Frequencies is
Faith.
who you were able to work with today.
Yeah, I also want to pray over faith frequencies and anybody who is just involved in that ministry. They're doing such good work. I know they have so many plans. It's so cool to see like the development. I feel like it's kind of the ground floor that I got to really hear about, and over all the families, past, present, and future, that will have the opportunity to serve within that ministry and be served by the ministry as well, and the impact that they'll make, an imprint that they'll leave on, you know, in the natural, but in the spiritual sense as well. And so we pray this in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, on that note, we'll have an exit ticket here brought to you by Michelle. I know she's got one lock and loaded here.
Okay, it's a ticket. Um, what is a favorite artist, photographer, or like work of art um, that you like best? And like if it's like a certain piece or you can just do the whole artist or and then like why do you like it?
Kind of challenging. So I think you're kind of looking for something along the lines of the visual arts. Um, is my takeaway from it. Something that it's appealing to the visual aesthetic. Um,
I'm sorry, I'm trying to
something
hit unmute like 10 times. Sorry. And it can totally be whatever you want. If you want to go with a different route, you can. Um, I think I was thinking like visual, but if you have something in a different media medium, go for it.
I think one thing that comes to mind for me is Thomas Kincaid. I forget exactly what he was referred to, the artist of light or the painter of light. And I think a lot of his works are either faith based or embraced by the faith based community. just because I don't know. That's just what comes to mind, and I'm not overly familiar with his works, but I know they're distinctive, and that's kind of what comes to mind. I mean, I can think of a classical artist like Picasso, which has a interesting style, but um, you've got me wanting to look up Thomas Kincaid and some of his works. So um, I think I'll leave it at that.
That's awesome. He's the guy, yeah, I think I had like some friends like in their house like and they would position it so that if like the sun would hit the wall,
Hmm.
it would look different at different times of the day.
Oh,
And like I think that's like almost like one of the draws of it was like it would almost like take on like a little bit of a different appearance. I may be wrong on that, but that's what I think I remember. Oh, why are you laughing? He did the laugh faces. Okay, what's yours? Okay, you want me to go first? So, I really like um because I feel like you can just look at them forever, like the Salvador Dali works. Um, and but probably my painting that I probably like the most is Picasso, the old guitarist. Um, and it's just I think it's in the Chicago. I think it's in the Chicago Art Museum, which is like one of my favorite art museums. And I think I saw the original in there. Um, and I don't know if it was like a print or something, but like um, there's like this one room. It's got like three or four of my favorites in it. But that one is that's just one of my favorites. The and it's like he did a lot of blue tones, so it's very kind of like melancholy, and it almost looks like he's blind in the picture. Um, and like the only thing that really has like a lot of like color is the actual guitar. And everything else just kind of fades into the background, like including the guitarist. Um, and so it's really, man, it captures the feels um very, very well. So that's probably mine.
I love the references because Thomas Kincaid, like I used to have a lot of the puzzles when like I want to say like early 90s, and I feel like puzzles were like such a massive thing um back then, and a few of them were Thomas Kincaid. And yeah, he has a certain aesthetic that you know it's him. So that's pretty cool. Um, and you know, Michelle's reference, Picasso. You know, I have a frame. Guernica is my, I think, my favorite and most impactful visual um, form of art. And I talked about a little bit before the history of it. I think it's still impactful because of one, it was a statement. It was a pretty defiant statement, really about um, many things, but really violence, you know, and this is what violence looks like because it was the bombing of Spain, the city of Guernica, obviously the town, and how massive the mural is. It, you know, I think it's one of those places I don't like to travel too much that I would want to see in person. Um, the symbolism, I love parables and symbolism. Um, and there's a lot of course, symbolism in his work, specifically that one. And one of the things is there's a depiction of a mother holding her child, and it always affects me, you know. So any body of work and Michelle may know this already about me, that is about human nature and and reflects, you know, all sides of human nature, which sometimes, of course, are in our humanness. There's violence, there's tragedy, there's there's excitement, there's all kinds of things going on, right? We're complex, we're made complex, and so for that reason, film movies are, very much something I enjoy. Um, there's a few of my favorites. Directors, David Lynch, is I think is a timeless storyteller. He has a certain aesthetic, of course, as well. My favorite, I mean, you could throw Scorsese in there as well. The character studies that I think and development that Scorsese, I think I mean, Scorsese, but I still feel like he's underrated in some of those character studies, like Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and there's a few nuggets too within his newer works for sure. My favorite go-to, you already know this, Michelle, is Quentin Tarantino. I love the backstory. I love his dedication. He creates mythology and things of that nature, and um, typically artists like him are very divisive. You either hate him or you love him. Um, and I think his masterpiece. I mean, man, they're all really well done, but I think is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's got a lot of layers to it. It's really, really well written. I believe that it's maybe his swan song, even though he's going to make one more film. And it's really, you could tell how intimate and personal it is. Um, because he grew up in Los Angeles and I grew up in the area of Los Angeles. My parents, I know some of the areas that he filmed in, and his dedication to recreating or creating the setting, like none of that was digital. He literally, would restore theaters and stuff like that just to film the movie. And the last thing I'll say, um, and this will really be my final thought, I'm not a big Tom Cruise fan of his movies. There's a few works, talented actor. Um, Born on the 4th of July was very real and raw. But I just heard this about him and I did some research. Um, I think sometimes Hollywood gets a bad rap, and that's my opinion. I didn't know how much this guy really does in the community. And, there's a lot of these, you know, people that have wealth that give a lot of it away. And I'm glad to hear these stories because I usually hear the negative stuff. And even if it's true, Lashon Hara is nothing I want to be a part of, especially when they're easy targets. And I think celebrities, politicians are easy targets sometimes for us. And I rather appreciate the artwork, the art form, and also when they do something that I believe is a human act of love, to acknowledge it, at least in my personal way, not always on the platform. But I recently kind of was like, oh, like he did all that stuff. Wow, that's pretty amazing, you know. And he's very, I guess, known in Hollywood for like not being bougie, which is a fresh of breath air that he has his driver drive like a 10-year-old car with like 300,000 miles around, and that kind of stuff. So I think that kind of is refreshing to know as well. Anyways, this is a super side note. Um, all right. Well, thank you for the exit ticket. Thank you, Brother Lee, for being present today, and Sister Michelle, and those listening. Tomorrow, join us for Elevation, where we'll kind of begin to unpack the new Torah portion and all the New Testament parallels as well. We're excited for it, and we love you guys. See you tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.